Vidya, it's recording, right?
Yes, it's recording.
It started recording, yeah.
All right. Okay. A very good afternoon and warm welcome to the fourth Research Scholars Lecture organized by the School of Sanskrit, Philosophy and Indic Studies, Goa University. Thank you for taking your time out to attend and engage with today's online guest lecture by Dr. Sophia Stone on the topic Philosophy for Communities in Transition, Philosophy for Self-Transformation. Before we start, please note a few things. Keep your mic on mute during the entire period of the lecture. The lecture is being recorded. The messages in the chat box are also being recorded. I now request Professor Koshi to give the welcome address.
Thank you, Vasudha, for those initial remarks. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you all to this very inspiring, lecture webinar by Dr. Sophia Stone. Dr. Sophia Stone is a very well-accomplished philosopher practitioner, I should say. And she has obtained her bachelor's degree in philosophy from University of California, Berkeley. Then she did her master's in philosophy with distinction from Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology, after which she had joined for her doctoral studies at Purdue University, US, and wherein she submitted her doctoral dissertation on the topic Plato's Metaphysics of Soul. Dr. Sophia has wide experience of teaching at different, institutions and places in US. She has taught, as part of her doctoral studies. She was a teaching assistant, then later became philosophy instructor at Purdue. She has also, taught at the community college and also, for Lynn, University in Florida. She has now associated with as an associate professor. Dr. Sophia's, area of competence or research primarily moves around ancient, Greek philosophy, philosophies of wisdom. She has also, worked on ethics, applied ethics, and she is also the founding, president of this, very interesting, organization, Wellness Foundation, and she has been conducting, mindfulness program as part of this organization, and she has a very interesting, CV. If you have the time to go, it's a very lengthy CV. I'm not going to read it out, the whole thing. I will later share with you those of you who are interested in her works. And she has also published in reputed academic journals on related themes, and she is a very dynamic philosopher and philosophy practitioner. With these few words, let me welcome you to this webinar. I hope soon you would be able to be with us physically. So one of these days, once the pandemic is over, we extend our invitation, kind invitation to be with us sometime, so that we have better interaction, and the faculty and the students will be able to learn from you how you conduct these sessions. With those few words, once again, I welcome Dr. Sophia Stone for today's presentation. And may I request Vasudha to proceed further. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Koshi. Yeah, thank you, Professor Koshi. We will be using menti.com as far as the questions are concerned, and instructions about menti.com will be put up by Vidya in the chat box. Over to you, Professor Dr. Sophia Stone.
Thank you, Vasudha, and thank you, Dr. Tharakan, for your invitation. Thank you, Vidya, for reaching out after reading that article in the Daily News about Wisdom's Edge. And I want to also thank you, Shefali, for being there at the call last week. We did a practice run. So I'm going to share my screen, but the first thing that I want to invite you to do is to go ahead and take out your phone. Believe it or not, I want you to be on your phone. And this is how we're going to interact. This is a way for me to connect all of us together. It's a way for us to mimic the in-person classroom, so to speak. So I'm going to share my screen, and there's a QR code. You can access it in a number of ways. You can take a picture of it, and then that link will open up. Or you can manually go to www.menti.com, and there is a QR code. I'm going to share my screen now. And I just want to apologize ahead of time if I have to get up real quick to let the puppy in. He was barking, and so I had to let him out. So I am at home. It is 6 o'clock in the morning. So these things, as we know with the pandemic, we have to adjust for family, all family members. Okay, so I'm going to present, and here we go. So my talk today is teaching for self-transformation, and there you go. There is the code. So you can either go to menti.com, which I have on my phone, or you can take your picture and click on the QR code. So that number is 37679151, and you hit submit. And then once you are there, go ahead and click on the thumbs up button that you would in for a Facebook post, because then I know that you are here. So right now I know that 3 people are on Menti, when I know that there are more than 20 people on the call. So I will just wait a little bit while you go. And this is optional, of course, you don't have to, but it makes the presentation more engaging. I am coming here to you as a scholar, but I also am coming here as president of Wisdom's Edge, and I have really a mission, and that is to teach compassion, understanding, and to give you a tool to teach philosophy in such a way that it can be self-transforming. And so in order for me to do this, I'm going to share a personal story. And that personal story, I must warn you, might trigger some of you, because in the personal story, I talk a little bit about abuse when I was a child. It's not a lot. I'm not going to go into detail, but it forms and shapes who I am and how I responded to it. And so I am going to share a little bit about that. And as Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, says, amore fati, we have to love our fate. We have to embrace it. Who we are is the sum total of our experiences, both good and bad. And so I will share this with you. So here's kind of the outline of the talk. I'm going to share my personal story, and then I'm gonna talk about the mission of Wisdom's Edge. Every nonprofit has a mission, and this is the purpose or the thesis, so to speak. I'll talk about the communities that we are currently reaching right now, and you'll notice that they are not the communities that are outlined. They're not completely the communities outlined in Wisdom's Edge in the mission. Then I'm going to share the approach to transformative teaching, and this will be with kind of going over the curriculum and the demonstration. And then I'm going to open up for questions, and we'll have a closing. And so each slide, there will be a chance for you to connect on your cell phone. And I recommend that you do, because there will be some slides that are too small for you to read on the computer screen. But if you have it on your phone, you can enlarge it on your phone. And so you can read However, you can adjust it to your vision, and we all have different visions, right? Okay. So self-transformation begins with self-examination. And my story really begins when I was 5 years old. We lived in a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood, and I had beautiful parents, but they were not happy. My mom was depressed. My father had been in the military. He had served in Vietnam, and they were just like oil and water. They divorced when I was 5.5, and I had a younger sister. She was not even 5 months old yet. And so we moved from a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood to a neighborhood that was not so beautiful, and an apartment that was not so big. And I shared a room with my baby sister. My mother married a second husband, and he was not a good man. And he would abuse me. And how I dealt with this is that I would close my eyes and I would count. And I would count until it's over. And from that moment, mathematics, numbers have given me a way to transform myself from my present reality to a different reality in a way. Uh, so, but nobody knew this about me. I kept it a secret. And I started to go into any kind of room, any kind of stairs, and I would mathematize my surroundings. And so I would count the number of stairs, and then pretty soon it got to be the point where I could look at stairs and I can guess the number and be pretty accurate. I would guess the number of tiles, and I would love finding patterns in numbers. And so when I was 10 years old, I would go to the library and I would look up different numbering systems and teach myself different number systems. But nobody knew this about me because all they saw was the external part of me. And whenever anybody would talk to me, they would always first talk about, I'm going to stop sharing right now. They would first talk about how I looked. They would mention my appearance. And so they would say that I was beautiful, attractive, very cute, well-dressed, well-mannered. And these were all external things about me. And so I quickly learned that my value, my self-worth was based on appearance, on my external shell, if you will. My parents didn't know that I had an aptitude for mathematics, even though I got straight A's in math. They never questioned it. And now with my sons having trouble in math, I realize that my parents missed an opportunity there. And so when I was 12 or 13, my father started to notice that I had been gaining a little bit of weight. And I think out of love, he would tell me that I should lose weight. I should exercise more. I don't want to get fat. And so I developed an eating disorder, and I would count calories. And when I would eat a certain amount, then I would make myself throw up. And this was a cycle. And I began to feel really, I had a bad self-esteem. And when I was almost graduated from high school, my father told me that he wasn't going to pay for college because I had this eating disorder. And then I quickly became depressed because of it. And rather than be compassionate, understanding, they did send me to a treatment center. But when I got out, they didn't want me living in the house anymore. And so I was quickly sent out without any means. I didn't have a job, and so I was homeless for a couple of months. And I tell this because when you're homeless, something happens to you. Your self-esteem really becomes very low. You feel discarded. You feel that nobody wants you. And I would walk around the neighborhood and I would smell the dinners in people's houses. And I would promise myself that every night when I had a family that I would cook for them. And I kept that promise to myself. So eventually I worked very hard. I eventually got to UC Berkeley, as Dr. Therakan has talked about that. And I became successful. I got my first job in philosophy. But one of the things that helped me transform myself and what helped me get out of my low self-esteem issues was reading Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And for those of you who do not know Plato's Allegory of the Cave, we are all prisoners in a cave. And we are looking at the shadows, and we've been looking at the shadows since birth. And if we are not educated, we think these shadows are real until somehow, someday, sometime, we are compelled to turn around and break free of these chains. And we come outside of the cave. And before we come outside, we see that somebody else is making those shadows on the wall, that there are people who are moving back and forth with vases and different objects above their head. And you can see that someone else is stoking the fire. And you can see that this projection is totally artificial, totally man-made. And it was then that I realized that my father's views about me, thinking that I should lose weight, my own views thinking that I didn't have any kind of self-worth, that my worth was my appearance, all these I realized were just shadows, culture projecting values, and that I didn't have to identify with those shadows, that I can make something new for myself. And that was when I really began to be serious in my studies. So I really attribute philosophy to this turning around. But when I got to Lynn University, I was I had to teach a class that they had already designed, world belief systems. And there I had to teach Eastern philosophical texts. So we taught the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Sermon of Benares. And that was when I started to learn about mindfulness. And so even though I had a pretty good confidence and self-esteem, I still had this mind chatter. I still had this anxiety a little bit. And what meditation has done, and reading the Tao Te Ching over and over again, reading the Sermon of Benares and the Four Noble Truths and the Middle Path, as you probably, most of you know, has helped me overcome this suffering that I've had internally. And so it was about 2019 that I wanted to go back to those communities, go back to places, go to homeless shelters. And I wanted to give these teachings to the margins of society. And so that is the mission of Wisdom's Edge. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. So my personal story really is the foundation for Wisdom's Edge. As Socrates says in Plato's Apology, as he's talking to the jury, that the unexamined life is not worth living for human beings. I think that's absolutely true for us. And so this is the mission statement for Wisdom's Edge. Wisdom's Edge works to promote philosophical inquiry by means of engaging discussion and dialogue that utilizes tools from the Good Thinkers Toolkit developed by Dr. Thomas Jackson. He is a professor emeritus at the University of Hawaii, and he is one of the founding members of the P4C Hawaii curriculum, that is philosophy for children. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But the Good Thinkers Toolkit is not just for children. It's not for teaching with children. It's for teaching with everyone. We all could use this Good Thinkers Toolkit to engage in children and adults deeper ways of thinking. So I go to these communities that do not have access to traditional philosophy courses at the university. My idea is to go to retirement centers, homeless shelters, children's centers, and prisons. And unfortunately, I cannot go to prisons right now because of COVID and the strict rules. But eventually, that's where we want to go. We want to go inside the prisons and teach philosophy, teach mindfulness, teach Western and Eastern philosophy. So our community outreach seeks to improve literacy, critical thinking, and oral communication skills while helping one to find purpose in life. The second purpose of Wisdom's Edge, and this is what makes it a social enterprise, is to promote and support the discipline of philosophy by providing jobs for graduates in philosophy and philosophy-related fields, as well as provide opportunities for creative projects that promote philosophical ideas. And so here I'm pictured reading The Good Ball, which is a children's book that I had written with my friend Chris Sellers, who did the illustrations, and I'll talk about that lesson in a little bit. So the communities that we currently reach are intergenerational communities, and here pictured you can see that there are actually there are about 12 students right now in the class, and the youngest, which you can't see, is 12 years old. The oldest is 80, so they're pretty large distances in age, and they are both men and women. This group is from Minnesota, and so it's a pretty white population in this particular community, but we also teach to other communities that have more diversity. I personally teach to women in transition from homelessness and coming out of prison. I teach to women at the Lord's Place, which is a wonderful organization here in South Florida that seeks to break the cycles of homelessness. I also serve families with broken relationships due to incarceration, and this is due to a partnership I have with Letitia Gordon's A Better Day Than Yesterday. She is in Virginia. And it's not just families broken with due to incarceration, but also long-term military deployment or divorce and estrangement. I also teach to homeschooled children because they are very open for me to come and give these kinds of lessons. So I want to just talk about a little bit what I do for children. I'll begin with the Good Ball and its lesson, and I'll talk about a little bit the mindfulness activity that I teach the children. And the plain vanilla technique I'm going to demonstrate for you here. And so let's see. So this is the Good Ball, and I just want to let's see, I want to share this tab. Can you see the Good Ball?
Yes, it's visible. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the idea is that there's a ball, and it is an activity. These are events that happen to us. And as you can see, we have two women who are either in the process of crossing a street or they need to cross the street. We have a young man in a sports car. We have a young man walking on the street. So they're all just kind of not engaged right now. They're just sharing that space. And then you have, think of the ball as an activity among people. And so here we have these interactions now. We have the grandmother who is crossing the street We have the young man who's impatient. He wants to continue driving. We have, but this is kind of like a neutral ball, maybe a good ball. He's patient. We have in the middle, we have kind of a bad ball. And the bad ball is that this young man doesn't want to stop for this young woman. And then we kind of have a neutral ball, right? So that's neither good nor bad. And so in a way, all of our actions, we can say, are either all interactions with people can be categorized as good actions, bad actions, or neutral actions. And so here are some examples of a bad ball, right? So the old woman, she wants to cross the street, but the gentleman speeds ahead and doesn't let her cross. The bad ball here is the woman drops her purse and the young man is impatient. And here we have a young man who just got pooped on by the bird. So they're all having, in some way, a bad day. And so this is our normal tendency when bad things happen to us. We want to throw the bad ball back, right? So the old woman is shouting at the car. The the young man is throwing a brick or a stone at the bird, which is not very nice. And of course, the young man is honking at this woman who dropped her purse. And you can imagine that nobody's feeling good in this picture. But here is an example of a good ball. Instead, what if the woman would just, patiently maybe eat a snack, or maybe the young boy takes a selfie, a funny selfie. Hey, I just got pooped on by the bird. That doesn't happen every day. I will post this on Facebook. And here the young man is listening to music while the woman picks up her purse, finds another way to spend time waiting. And so imagine how the world might be if we turn more bad balls into good balls. The world would be a much better place. So that's the first lesson of the good ball, where I would invite the children to talk about an activity that would be described that they would say is a bad ball. And what this does is it gives children language to talk about things in an abstract way, to process them, but they can identify with a good ball, a bad ball, or a neutral ball. And so if you are having struggles with your child who tends to throw tantrums or tends to get angry, you can say, hey, you have a choice. When you get a bad ball, you have a choice, and you can hold that ball and you can stop and you can think about, how can I change this bad ball into a good ball? And so you encourage your child to throw the bad ball, to change the bad ball into a good ball, and to throw the good ball back, or at least make it neutral. And so that's how we generate discussion with children, is with that story. With mindfulness, we talk about, I first get them to notice their surroundings. I first get them to notice the landscape, and what do they see around you? What is a landscape? And so they'll talk about what a landscape is. And I say, okay, well, what are the things in the landscape? And so they'll say tree or a car. Okay. And then I say, okay, what about the seascape? What is the seascape? And so they'll talk about the ocean, or they'll talk about a sailboat. They'll talk about the wind. And then I said, okay, what about the soundscape? And this gets them focused on the sounds. And so then they distinguish between sounds. They distinguish between cars or birds and wind. And then I say, okay, I invite you to close your eyes and let's think of the mindscape. And then I would teach them actually the meditation of counting, as counting has been for me always a source of calm. And it takes me out of pain, whatever pain I am in, whether it's delivering my child in the ER room, or whether it's going through a difficult time. I find counting very soothing, very healing, and they know how to count. And so it's, in a way, an easy way to teach young children how to meditate. Then I'm going to talk about plain vanilla. Plain vanilla is a technique that was started by and developed by the Philosophy for Children in Hawaii. And they developed this conversation technique because they found that the regular philosophy class, where the instructor was at the front and you had the children in the rows, was very top down. And there are a lot of children there in Hawaii who are from indigenous cultures. You also have people from all over the world settling in Hawaii. And so you have children of different nationalities. And some of those, so you have not just white children, but you have African American children. You also have Asian children, and then you have indigenous Hawaiian children. And there is a strata in society if you have the classroom be the traditional classroom. And so what they do is they have everyone sit in a circle. And plain vanilla is this idea that everybody has their own particular flavor, their own particular interest, and everybody should have an opportunity to speak. Everybody should have an opportunity to be heard. And so we go over the plain vanilla rules in a way, and children begin to ask questions, and then they vote on the questions that they heard, and whoever's question got the most votes, that's where we begin. And you let the children decide who gets to speak next. It's not the instructor, it's not the professor, it's the child. And so you have the discussants leading the discussion. And when you do this very well, the professor doesn't have to teach it all. It's just the children talking. And in a similar way, you can do this with adults as well. And if you do this correctly in the right way, you just have people respecting each other, talking with each other, and having deep and meaningful conversations. And so we will do that today. Let's see. So we're going to go back. Some of the activities that we also do are activities with the public. And so here is a fundraising activity collaboration that I have done with the Lake Worth Waterkeepers, where we created 3 days in nature, where we read philosophy about nature's objects. We reflect on our connection with the earth. And through writing and drawing and painting, we create art and poems and these kinds of things in journals. Each day we focus on either trees, a lake, or the ocean. It really connects people with the earth. And so you can see that everybody has their shoes off, their feet are grounded in the sand. They are painting with watercolors that we give them. And this is after reading some philosophy passages together. And so here we have a participant, and you can see that she has painted a tree. And this is from being in an oak grove. And she writes, "Under the shade of an old oak tree in one of the wilder sections of Del Rey's Orchard View Park, Sophia and Melissa seamlessly facilitated a morning of conversation, contemplation, and creativity in nature." And so this really builds community. And boy, I'll tell you, after, we're still in the pandemic, but as we transition from the pandemic, we will need more activities that connect us, that engage us with nature, that brings us outside, and really touches our hearts, touches our souls with each other. So our approach to transformation with philosophical texts is to, number one, and this is so important, to establish a safe and welcoming space. And this is part of my motivation for sharing my story with you, so that you can feel comfortable sharing or thinking about your story and bringing that. You can bring your worries, you can bring your troubles. They are welcome here. We will not judge. So we invite sharing of problems or issues. And then I introduce and apply a philosophical text. And sometimes this is just focused on the text that I've chosen for that day. But other times I will bring in other texts, kind of free form, which I'll model for you today in just a second. I invite self-reflection, self-evaluation, and then we end with mindfulness. We end with a little guided meditation. So the curriculum, I begin with Eastern philosophy, and I begin with Eastern philosophy because we are in the West, and we tend to think that the West is best, and this humbles us a little bit. The West is not the best. It's just one of many uh, approaches to culture and to life. And so I find also that Eastern philosophy, you're more flexible in your thinking than in the West. There are more opportunities for you to challenge your own beliefs, to see things in a different way. And so that's why I've chosen Eastern philosophy first. And we begin really with the Bhagavad Gita because of that story within a story. And we all start with our stories because that is really the foundation of who we are, is kind of the sum total of our life experiences. And what I like about the Bhagavad Gita is that Arjuna is struggling. He has an internal struggle that is metaphorically played out on the battlefield, uh, in a real war. And we have internal battles all the time. And so this is a good way to talk about the the microcosm and the macrocosm, the outer and the inner battle that we are all fighting. Then we go next to the Sermon at Benares. There, as you know, we teach the middle path and the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Way. And I invite participants, and this curriculum is really for the adults. I invite them to bring in their own experiences. What are you suffering right now? What is troubling you right now? And then I have them look at it in the Buddhist way of, well, what is your attachment that is causing you to suffer this way? Then we go to the Tao Te Ching, and the Tao Te Ching, I love the Tao Te Ching because whatever issue you have, you can find a solution in the Tao Te Ching. You can find a way to think about it in a different way. So the Tao Te Ching, I think, of all these texts, gives the most hope, in my opinion. We talk about Confucius's Analects, just because there is a particular order of doing things, a particular way of doing things, and it's really enculturated. And so it gives us perspective on kind of what culture and society expects of us. And we can talk about, okay, what is the right way to act or behave or to live? And so I'm gonna show you kind of an exercise that we did after reading the Analects. And finally, we talk about the Pillow Book. The Pillow Book is 11th century Japanese text by Sei Shonagon. She's an emperor courtesan, and she is around. I think she was assistant to Empress Teishi. And what she would do is every night before she would go to bed, she would write in her book, which is why it's called the Pillow Book, right before she goes to sleep. And she would write lists. And it wasn't just lists of what I'm going to do. It's lists about what makes her happy, what makes her sad, what gets her anxious. And so she would write these lists. And I realized that writing lists about a particular situation can give you distance from that situation and allow you to analyze it in ways that you might not have been able to analyze it before. And so in one session, my healing session, I had a woman who was having a difficult time with her sister. She hadn't talked to her sister in a long time. Her sister recently lost a child, and she didn't know how to approach her sister. And so I had her write a list of all the things that she loves about her sister, all the connections that she has with her sister, and then all the things she finds difficult with her sister. And through this, she was able to talk about things that she never talked about before to anybody about her sister. And just being able to talk about that with somebody else in a group, in a safe environment, was very healing for her. And she was able to then, the very next day, call her sister on the phone and have a good connection with her. So this is an example of kind of an application of Confucius Analects. I had invited women from the Lord's Place to write their own Analects. And so what they wrote was very poetic. And so they wanted to write an Analects for the home. So this is specifically for women in America 2021. And as you know, we all have been experiencing the pandemic, but these are women who are coming out of homelessness. So what is the home is a really important concept for them. Women should adapt to their surroundings with the heart. What thou shalt say to the wall. Speak with your heart and love and acceptance. How shall we move this wall? What is our motive in our heart? What is the wall? What shall I do with this wall? What the heck is going on with me in this moment? Obstacles may be considered a wall. So what do we say to this wall? We have the power to move or break the wall. We should treat the wall with respect and kindness. The wall is solid and has a place. The walls are a foundation of a house. If you knock all of them down, the roof will fall. The wall can imprison you. It can be protective. It can shelter you. What is it that we want it to be? The metaphysics of the wall. It is how we interpret it. It is what we think is true or not true. What thou shalt say to the wall. And so, kind of from a simple task, something very beautiful and poetic came about. And please excuse the typos and the improper punctuation. I was dictating or typing as they were giving me ideas for what we should write as an intellect. But you can see we can identify with this. We do have walls, and these walls do support us. However, they can imprison us. And so we have to think about our own walls in this way. And, similar to Amare Fati, right, Friedrich Nietzsche's Love Your Fate, the wall, we should respect the walls, right? These walls are really the foundation of us. And if we knock all of them down, the roof will fall, right? So we can't knock down our past experiences. It's best that we embrace these experiences, maybe reinterpret these experiences so they serve us. The curriculum for Western philosophy is very simple and, to me, straightforward. We begin with Plato's Apology because there we have an example of Socrates, a man who lived according to his principles and died according to his principles. We need so much in this culture, people of principled living and what it means to live principled. We have so much media, so much news and movies that really don't really focus on principled living. So I invite participants to talk about their own principles in before we approach the text. And then Plato's Crito, where his friend Crito is in the cell of Socrates trying to convince him to escape. And that's a fun dialogue. But what's interesting about the Crito is that a lot of the arguments that Socrates makes for why he's not going to escape resonate with how Lord Krishna convinces Arjuna to fight. And so I see a deep similarity between Plato's metaphysics and the metaphysics of the Bhagavad Gita. And I know that I'm not the only one to make that claim. And then finally, Plato's Republic, of course, book 7 with the allegory of the cave is a lesson that we teach. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, I give a brief overview, and then we focus on that virtue of pride or megalosoukia, especially with women. It's interesting because Aristotle didn't write his Nicomachean Ethics for women. He wrote it for men. And so some of the things he says in the Greatness of Soul passage really is focused on men, but it's very empowering. And I think could help women, especially women who have low self-esteem or who have real struggles with social issues in their lives, to rise above it in the way that the great souled man would. The Stoics, various passages from the Stoics, but I focus on the passage where they argue that women should take up philosophy. And finally, depending on the group, I'm a little bit flexible. I use existentialist philosophy or feminist philosophy, depending on the group. So the curriculum really is flexible. I like to begin with the core Plato and Aristotle and the Stoics text, and then however I feel that whatever I feel that the participants need, I will choose those other texts. So I'm going to demonstrate now, and if you haven't been on Menti, go ahead. And I realized that I never changed my presentation in the Menti. So keep hitting next until you go to this page with the demonstration, and go ahead and click on the heart when you are here. And so here I invite you to describe a problem or issue you are having that troubles you right now. And I invite you to take a risk and share. Nobody knows who is behind that problem, that issue. So, so I'll give you a couple minutes and to write your answer. And so one of these things that I invite with your posting a problem or issue is, let's not try to guess who's behind that issue. So we have 3. Do we have any more? Thank you. All right, so let's take a deep breath in. And I want to thank those of you who are taking a chance with me and trusting our community with these issues. So the first, to look after an ailing patient, a parent, Well, there are, I can identify with this. My father, right now he's in the later stages of Parkinson's. He's not the person that he used to be. He used to compete in triathlons. He used to be very athletic. He was a hero in the Vietnam War, and now he can barely walk. And so whether you're looking after your ailing parent who cannot feed him or herself or cannot bathe, it's difficult, right? It's difficult because you are the parent in a way, and you are no longer the child in a way. And so the best way to look at this is that everything changes. And one symbol in Taoism that is helpful is the Tai Chi symbol, the yin and the yang. And do you know the yin and the yang? Let me see if I can find the image. Yes, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to share this real quick. So you have the yin and the yang. The yin is the light part. I always get confused, which is the light and the dark, but I believe the yin is the light and the yang is the dark. And there's a little bit of light in the dark, and there's a little bit of dark in the light. And after reading a few others, you can see that this symbol can help you as well. A very smart student of mine likes to think of those dots as the seeds of which you plant, the seeds of which you of which will grow, and what you focus on will become that reality. What you focus on will expand. And this is part of the transformation of Taoism, is that you can focus on, there are these harmony of opposites, right? So long and short, easy and difficult, right? These balance out each other. And so we know one because we have the other. So we're going to go back to, let's see, the mentee. And so focus on what gives you pleasure, what gives you the brightness of taking care of your ailing parent. Maybe it is just the gratitude in their eyes. Maybe it's the happiness in their voice that you're experiencing, and you focus on that good part, and that will illuminate you and give you strength for the difficult ones. And then with the difficult ones, whether your parent is falling, or whether the parent can't control their bowels, or look to find a light way, I wouldn't say a humorous way, make fun of it, but try to find a lighthearted way to deal with it. Okay, so we have a lot. Let's see. Press enter to pause the scroll. Let's see. So dealing with, I have an issue with impatience. This is quite easy to take care of, actually. Is to focus on the breath. And so when you have impatience, if you put your hand on your belly and you just start breathing and you focus on the breath, this can give you patience, believe it or not. Another way to give yourself patience is by counting. And the more you train your mind in this way, the easier it will get. I'm going to look at indecisive between life and death. I'm not sure what this means, but we are always between life and death. In fact, the only thing that we can be sure of is that we are going to die. And as Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, right, that because our bodies are mortal, we necessarily are going to die. And so why worry about it? It's something that happens to all mortals. But I don't know if this is a choosing between life and death. Whether the person who's writing this is thinking about ending a life. And here I would recommend the text of Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus, where Sisyphus is condemned to push a boulder up an inclined hill, maybe a mountain, for all of eternity. And it's a similar way that we have these tasks that we have to do. We are condemned to do them. And yet we can find meaning in these small little tasks. And so just as Camus says that when Sisyphus rolls the boulder up the hill and gets to the top and he lets go of the boulder, he comes back down. And just as he has to start again, we must imagine that he is happy. And so find that seed again, going back to Tai Chi, to find that one bit of happiness in your life. And if you are unable to, right, if there's something in your life that you just can't be happy about, help others, take the focus off of yourself, and do charitable work, volunteer. The best way to bring yourself out of kind of a sad situation is to do something good for somebody else and don't let them know that you are doing it, right? Keep that volunteer, that good thing hidden. Let's see. I want to focus on this: to live and share a space with someone you don't like. Well, with the Tao Te Ching, there are no absolutes. And so you don't like that person and you don't like that you have to share that space because you are looking at them in a single way. Try to find something that you do like about them, just that one thing. Maybe write a Shea Sonagon list and write as for as many things you don't like about that person. I challenge you to write some good things about that person. Maybe you don't have to like them, but good things about that person. And then your orientation to that person will change. And I guarantee you that relationship will change. I want to focus on dealing with loneliness. We are always alone in a way. We are born into this world alone and we die alone. And we can be our own best friend or we could be our worst enemy. The best way, actually, is to go out in nature, and you can befriend nature, and you can learn to communicate with nature. And nature is a very good best friend. And we just recently have a puppy, and I am never lonely anymore with this puppy. So if you are feeling, and you can be, you can feel loneliness in a crowd. You can feel loneliness with millions of people surrounding you. And it's because you don't have a connection to others. So let's go back to here. I completed my master's a while ago, and I don't think I'm interested in the same field anymore. I'm thinking of changing fields and go on to do other more practical things. I don't know if I will be successful or even learn another course. So the longest journey begins with a single step. Great that you already have your master's. Now you can do something else. You don't need your master's to, that can be your wall. It can imprison you, but it can also give you freedom. And so I encourage you, go ahead, change fields, go ahead, do something else, do what makes you happy. Don't do what others think that you should do. And don't worry about success or failure, right? So whether you are successful or whether you are a failure, it's the same. Just follow your bliss. Do what serves you. If you want more practical things, do that. Or if the impractical things make you happy, do that. But don't do something because you think others want them to do that. As Lao Tzu says, if you care about what other people think, you become their prisoner. I'm a little bit concerned about time, and so I'm going to move on, but I want to thank all of you for sharing. I wish that we had 2 hours just to do this, and we could talk about all of these things. So the plain vanilla technique is you establish rights. So everybody has a right to speak. Everybody has a right to be silent. Everybody has a right to invite. And everybody has a right to pass. And so this idea is to present a passage from a text. You invite questions and vote on those questions, and the question with the highest votes gets chosen. And we're going to do this quickly. I will end in 15 minutes. Is that going to give us enough time, or should we skip this? I don't know.
Yeah. Professor, you have time. So we end by around 5 o'clock, 5:50.
Okay.
Because questions also. So we have that much time. Yeah. Feel
Okay.
free.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, so go to next question. There is no voting on this page, but if you go, I messed up on my cell phone, and now I can't go back to the previous screen. But this is the Good Thinkers Toolkit, and I invite Vidya to put the link for the Good Thinkers Toolkit in the chat so that people can access it on their computers when this session ends. But these are the questions that invite us to think deeper. So, and it's by the Enneagram Right Tech. W is for what do you mean? Or what does the author mean? R is for reasons. What are the reasons being offered to support a claim? A is for assumptions. Is it reasonable to assume? What assumptions are embedded in this argument? Inferences, these are if-then statements. So is it reasonable to infer this from that? Or if such and such happens, then is it reasonable to infer this thing? And so on. T, this is so important even for today, to ask if it's true. Is what is being said, is it true? And if it is true, then what does that imply? How do we know it's true? E is for examples or evidence. Give me some examples of, Socrates' questioning. Give me some examples. What are some evidence? What's some evidence being offered to support or illustrate a claim? And then finally, counter examples. Offering counter examples or counter evidence to prove a claim is not true. And so you can say, well, what are some counter examples to what I just said? And these are challenges, but if you challenge your participants, they will think deeper about a text. Okay, so ready? Now we're going to go to the Tao Te Ching. So I encourage you, you could also look at the Tao Te Ching. This is numbered aphorism 22 in your in the text. Crippled becomes whole, crooked becomes straight, hollow becomes full, worn becomes new, little becomes more, much becomes delusion. And so at that very beginning, we have the harmony of opposites that we see represented in the Tai Chi symbol of the yin and yang. But we see that cripple becomes whole because there's a little bit of whole in the crippled, and there's a little bit of crippled in the whole. We see, so this is why I love the Tai Chi symbol. This is why I love helping people with their problems, because whatever problem you were having, think of the opposite, right? So I remember one of the problems is dealing with an abusive parent. Well, what would happen if you treated that parent as if they weren't abusive? What would happen if you showed your parent what love and compassion and kindness can do? Maybe they don't have that model. Maybe they never had a model for that. And so there is this way that you can be the opposite of what you are being shown, and that opposite will come to light in that other person, whether you're talking about a boss or a roommate or a parent. So after these harmony of opposites, you have therefore. So now it's a conclusion. Therefore, sages cling to the one and take care of this world. Do not display themselves and therefore shine. Do not assert themselves and therefore stand out. Do not praise themselves and therefore succeed. Are not complacent and therefore endure. Do not control, and therefore no one under heaven can contend with them. The old saying, crippled becomes whole, is not empty words. It becomes whole and returns. So I want you to think about this passage and maybe recall right tech, right? You can think of the meaning. What does it mean? What are the reasons for thinking this is true? Is it true? Is it false? Okay, so think about a question that you could come up with, that you can offer for discussion. And I'm going to move to the next slide. So now I suggest using the Good Thinkers Toolkit to offer a question for discussion about the previous passage. So I'm gonna move my slide back to the Tao Te Ching, but you can open up the Q&A and you can ask a question. So I'm going to go back. And I'm also asking a question. So I invite you to ask your question. I want to thank all of you who posted questions, problems before. I invite you now to post a question. So I'm going to go, we have 3 questions. I'm going to give some more time for a couple more questions so we have enough to vote. I apologize if you could hear my family. It's just part of presenting. It's 6 a.m. here. All right, so we're gonna go now to the questions, and it looks like we have 3 questions, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so so what I want you to do is I want you to vote for 2 of the 3 questions. Okay, I don't know that everybody has voted. I know that there are like 20 or 30 people. If you came in the middle of the presentation, you can go to menti.com and use the code 37679151. And so you can vote and just now vote for your questions. And so there are 2 questions that got the most votes. The first one is, let's see, what does it mean that the sage clings to the one and so takes care of the world? And so I'm going to stop the share and go back to just speaking. And that question actually was my question, so I will answer it first. And then if you want to respond, go ahead and raise your hand if you have something to say, if you want to say something, and then I will call on you. But what I think it means is that when you think of the one, you think of the wholeness of the world. You think of how we're all connected, and that's how we take care of the world. So the sage doesn't put themselves first. They don't put any one problem first, that they see the whole rather than the part. And so this is kind of a metaphysical approach. And if you've read Plato's Parmenides, you can maybe know where I'm coming from. But when you step back and take your own personal perspective out of things and look at things as they are as we're all interconnected, then you can begin to take care of the world. So I invite now, if you want to respond, go ahead and raise your hand, and I can invite you to speak. And everyone has the right to remain silent. So if no one wants to speak, we could go on to the next one, but you're free to challenge me on this. The next question is life real? So whoever asked this question, I invite you to unmute yourself and answer that question. Everybody's shy. It's okay. So there is a saying, in the Tao Te Ching, the master lets things come and she lets things go. And so it's fine that you don't want to participate, but it's a great way to have a discussion where you let the participants lead the discussion rather than the guest speaker. So I wanted to model that for you. Okay, so we will go to the next tab. All right, so my idea was that we would have a rich conversation about the Tao Te Ching, that passage number 22. And it's okay that we didn't have that conversation, but I invite you now to go to this slide and think about what was said, what was heard, maybe what was posted for the problems that people are having. The mission of Wisdom's Edge, my story. So in a word, what did you take away from the talk? So all of you have taken away something different. You all have your own unique experiences. And what I love here, what I love seeing this is we have peace, embrace your totality, yes, amore fati. Your self-worth, yes, your self-worth is not based on what other people perceive you or what other values, but your own worth. The meaning of compassion, yes, a reverence to life. So thank you. I love this. Thank you for engaging and participating in the word art. I'm going to now just show you the references. So the references from the Tao Te Ching, I used the Stephen Addis and Stanley Lombardo translation, and I got the Good Thinkers Toolkit from the P4C Hawaii website. And then for further reading, for our Western texts, if you might not have them, there's Aristotle. I use the Jonathan Barnes edition, the complete works of Aristotle. I use those translations for my work on Aristotle. I use Brad Inward and Lloyd Gerson's The Stoic Reader, Leonard Harris, A Philosophy of Struggle, although I have yet to use that text, but he recommended it. I'm looking for the right group to talk about that because it's Philosophy Born of Struggle. It is dealing with racism and race-related issues. And then I used the complete works of Plato, edited by John Cooper and Mr. Hutchinson. So that is the end of my presentation, and I want to thank all of you for being here and hearing the presentation. And that's all I have to say. And if you want, we can open it up to questions. And if there are no questions, because maybe because we are being recorded, or maybe you're shy, we can end. So
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Sophia. It was a wonderful, session. So, Vasudha, could you please announce
Yes.
the time for question? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be taking questions for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Shefali has raised her hand. So, if you are shy to ask a question directly, or you would like to type in the chat box, then please go ahead. Yeah. So, Shefali, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, I'll ask the question, Vasudha. Thank you. Dr. Stone, what I would like to know is, in being mindful, in order to be in that state, I was the one who posted the question earlier. To be mindful, one needs to be, or rather have a set of prerequisites. It's something that does not come very easily. It's only, like, for example, when you are facing something and you're going through a situation, to disconnect yourself from that becomes very difficult. It can be felt by the person to whom maybe you're sharing it with, that you're going through an issue. It's only, I believe, that after you have gone through something that you get an insight and that makes you mindful. Would you like to share your thoughts on being mindful?
Sure. So I agree that being mindful is, it's kind of like a muscle. We all have the ability to be mindful. We all have the tools to being mindful, but if we're not aware of these tools, we don't develop this muscle, and it's very hard to do. So I agree with you. So thank you, Shefali, for your question. So for me, I read about meditation before I started to meditate. However, after learning how to meditate, I realized that this counting that I discovered as a child, and being able to look in the room and just to mathematize the room, was my way of being completely present in the room and taking my mind out of the worries that I was having about my weight, or my studies, or what was going on at the home. And so yes, if you have a daily practice of meditation, that's going to make it easier for you to slip into that distance, that being separate. It's also helpful to meditate in a community where you have a place that you go regularly to talk and to meditate and to be together in a peaceful state. That is also very helpful. I do want to say that maybe there can be too much mindfulness. And I'll just give you an example. It's a funny example. And that is, we had, I live in South Florida, so we do have hurricanes. And the very first hurricane that we experienced, I wasn't into mindfulness, and we all freaked out, and we all just drove up north to Indiana and stayed until the hurricane passed. But the second time that we had a hurricane, my husband was in California, and there was a level 5, there was a category 5 coming to Florida. And I was home alone with my 2 young children. And I had been practicing mindfulness, and I was quite calm. And I was like, okay, either it's going to come or it's not going to come. And I have food in my cabinets. I have water. And so either our house is going to be destroyed or it's not going to be destroyed. And we have our bags packed, and we're either going to leave or we're going to stay. And it's going to be okay either way. And so I was laughing at myself because it's such a different approach to the hurricane from before. Before, I had fear, panic, worry. What's going to happen? It's funny, the mind shatter that happens when you have so much fear and anxiety. And now I don't have it. I had recently, I had a not very nice experience with an administrator, and I noticed I was very angry about what happened. And I realized, I went back to the ancients, right? And one of the texts that we also study is Vishnu Purana. And it said there that anger is a passion for fools. It makes you delusional. And several other ancient texts, even in Christian texts, and even in the Sermon at Benares, you have this idea that anger makes you delusional. And so when I'm angry, I have that awareness, oh, I am angry. And then I remember from the ancient texts, anger makes you delusional. Anger takes away your ability to reason in a clear way. And so I now know, okay, I'm in a state of anger, and I'll just wait until that goes away, and then I will figure out the best way to respond. So you're absolutely right that mindfulness is, if you are not trained in it, if no one has taught you how to meditate or to look at things in a dispassionate way, that it's hard to do. But there are plenty of books that you could read on mindfulness, and I encourage you, if you don't have a mindfulness practice, if you're interested in a mindfulness practice, to study first, to read about it first, and then try it. And there are plenty of apps, free apps, and apps that you can pay for, that you can download on your phone, to teach you mindfulness. And there are different ways of meditation. I hope that answers your question. If not,
Yes, Dr. Stone. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Professor Koshi, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Vasudha. Dr. Sophia, I was a bit curious to know when you were, using some of these resources from the Eastern tradition, for example, the Gita, or even, Tao Chi, etc. How was your participants, the young and the teens, the children, how receptive they were? I mean, in opening up their thoughts to a different tradition. Was it easier, or you had to really, make it happen? I'm curious to know about it.
Well, I think with any text, whether it's, from a different culture or not, the best thing to do is to start with the participants and to find something that's familiar to them, and then bring the text to them. And so with the Bhagavad Gita, I focus on when Lord Krishna brings Arjuna to the battlefield, and he sees his family on the battlefield, and now he's starting to think about the consequences. And so we talk about fear, we talk about anxiety, we talk about, well, when has this happened to you? So along the way, we don't just read the whole text, we read it in chunks, we read it in parts, and so I invite them to talk about their experiences, and then I weave those experiences in to the text. And I do this both with Western philosophy and the Eastern philosophy. So I don't know if you have athletes at the University of Goa, but we have athletes here at the university, and some of the athletes, believe me, are not interested in philosophy at all. And so what I have to do is I have to find a way to connect them to the text. So I have one student, for example, who was the first week, she was like this on her desk. She was just not interested in all. And I was thinking, how can I reach her? How can I get to this student? And so I sat next to her when students were doing presentations, and I noticed that she was always bouncing around. And so I asked her, I said, are you an athlete? And she says, yes, I play basketball. And I said, okay. When is your game? And she told me the next game. I said, okay. So I went to her game, and I noticed that she's a great 3-point shooter. I don't know if you know about basketball, but the 3-point shooters are when you're far away from the basket and you throw it, and the physics that allows that parabola to put the ball in the basket is just amazing, and it's wonderful. And so she was actually one of the stars of the basketball team. So when I'm talking about Galileo and I'm talking about the laws of physics and Aristotle's physics, I would talk about the basketball and I would talk about throwing these 3-pointers. So there's always a way, I think, to bring philosophy to the student. But the first thing you need to do, the very first thing, is you need to find out the student, who they are, what they like, what is their interest. And I saw that in the chat, let's see, Simon Paul, is it a mind shift that makes all the difference? And I would say absolutely. And that's why I love the writing of lists with the Seishonagon list, right? If you're having a difficult time, identify that difficulty, whatever it is. And then write a list about that difficulty, and then write what's easy about that difficulty, because there's always a little bit of yin in the yang, and there's always a little bit of yang in the yin. Simon, Paul, please.
Good evening, ma'am. It was wonderful listening to your talk. I liked everything of it, especially when you said we have to embrace the totality of ourselves, both the good and bad of ourselves, not only just think about the good side of ourselves. But after all this, what is I gathered is that it is mainly mind shift. Even mindfulness is all bringing back your mindfulness, the shift of that what you're thinking. So is it not something like positive thinking that is people nowadays are coming up with? Many of them speak about the need to be positive thinking, see the good in bad, and even in that dot thing you said, black, this one has a white dot, and white, this one has a black dot. Everything is a mixture. So I found ultimately it is more of a mind shift. Of course it is a philosophy which we study, but basically it needs a mind shift or a shift of your thought. You need to come to a new level. Even when you are saying that you had a mind chatter that maybe there will be hurricane, I may go out of my house. So it's all to do with your thinking, and you have to think also that who knows, nothing can happen. We may be here, nothing may happen. My food is there, I'm fine. So that is where I was trying to connect, because I found that is that a call to shift of your thinking, as you say.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Simon Paul, for your astute comment. And I actually think that this positive thinking, oh, just think positive, it's actually not true thinking, right? If you just think positive, because taking care of an ailing parent, you can't just think of the positive. You have to acknowledge the negative, and you embrace both. Because I think to not acknowledge the negative, in some other way, that negative is going to come up, and you
I'm
don't
not
want to.
saying I'm not saying about acknowledging, but we cannot just keep on thinking in that one particular line. We have to come to even positive thinking is not in that sense, because otherwise we would be only thinking in one particular way where it is only negative. Don't even pay attention. So as you said, hurricane, that means the moment you think of it and you still only get that is as if it is going to happen only. But you also had a positive thought. Who knows? Nothing can happen, nothing may happen, and everything is fine. So I'm saying in that even I'm not saying only think about the positive thing. When you are taken over by negative thinking, to put it nicely, when you are thinking on a certain line, same line, or you are shifting your thinking, changing your thinking, is that the important thing here? Forget about negative, positive, both ways I'm saying.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely right. It is a shift of thinking. It's also a shift of focus, and that is also the basis of mindfulness, right? If you
Yes.
are having anxiety, stress, fear, it's because you're time. I call it you're time traveling. You're thinking about the future, or you're thinking about the past, and you're not in the present moment. And so the quickest way to focus on the present moment is, I learned this by reading Eckhart Tolle, is to look at nature, to watch a bird feed its children, or to watch a bird in flight. Birds, I love to watch birds, but you can also look at butterflies, or you can look at ants crawling, or you can look at worms crawling in the rain. Just this way of focusing your attention to something else can also shift your emotions and your feelings. But what you're suggesting, which is also what I'm suggesting when we're looking at deep problems, is to have that mind shift. But you can only do that mind shift when you think dispassionately about the positive and the negatives, or the difficulties and what is easy, or the long and the short, right? These harmony of opposites that we have in the Tao Te Ching. So we look at it in multi dimensions in a way, dispassionately, and then step back. And then sometimes you will have that mind shift. So I see Vishnu had the hand raised, and then there are other.
Yes, Vishnu, go ahead. Vishnu, then we have two questions in the chat box, Anupam and Sankit. So, yeah, Vishnu, you can go ahead.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for the very excellent talk. First of all, I have to start with a small warning. I'm not trained in philosophy, so if my question can be very amateurish, so pardon me for that. So basically, my question was more about the paragraph, like the Tao teaching part which you shared, like the second paragraph, which, so I basically, as I said before, I'm not trained in philosophy, so pardon me if my interpretation is completely bad. Because the second para is all about saying, do not display themselves and therefore shine, do not assert themselves and therefore stand out, but the whole paragraph to me is an assertion itself. Like, it says, do not do this, do not do that. First of all, what my first question was basically like the whole point of do not display themselves and therefore shine, do not assert yourself. Like this paragraph was probably written in 6th century BC. I just Googled it. Do you think it still applies today in our comparative world? Like, we live in a capitalistic society where, and we see ads all the time, and our world is built on competition. Like, if you don't display yourself, you are not going to succeed. If you don't, one of the criteria for selecting leaders in corporations is to be assertive. I mean, praising themselves to a certain extent, or I mean, I'm just curious, do you think that the fact that the person takes a very assertive stance, like do not do this, do this, do this, like, do you think it still applies in our time period, or I don't know, maybe it's outdated today? Yeah.
No, actually, I think it does apply to today. And I think, capitalism is just one value system. And in a way, to me, capitalism has an inverse of values that I want to hold. I appreciate capitalism because it's given us so much, but it's also destroyed so much, right? It's based on greed, selfishness. It's based on always craving. It's based on craving and desiring, and it's based on attachment. So I'll give you an example of I'll give you a counterexample to what you just said, and that is there is a wonderful man who recently passed away. His name is Jerry Hildebrand. He was part of our university. He was one of the first Peace Corps members when Nixon first started the Peace Corps. And he devoted his life to others. He never took credit for anything, but he was responsible for so much. And his life wasn't about getting credit. His life was really, truly a seva, a service for others, a selfless service. And I think that when you do that kind of service, you shine like a star in the nighttime sky. You you don't have to make a trumpet for the things that you do because others will do it. And so Jerry's legacy, he's touched so many lives, so many more lives in a very positive way. He's helped women in Rwanda with their own social enterprises so they can create meaningful work for themselves and to pull themselves out of poverty. I would compare him, he doesn't hold a candle to Jeff Bezos. And I know that, you know, in a capitalist society, we judge a person by their wealth. And I think that, you know, in some ways it's very superficial, artificial. But I think we should judge a person on their character and what they do for others. But that's my own view. And so when we go back to the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching has a different hierarchy from capitalism. The Tao Te Ching has a hierarchy of where you put the earth first. You don't put your selfish desires first. And so I would say that putting yourself first and making a trumpet of all of your good deeds, making yourself stand out so you could be the leader, right, is delusional in a way, because your value, your worth is based on what other people see you. It's not your authentic self. So in a way, you're right that the Tao Te Ching, you know, was written a long time ago, and it seems like it clashes with how we think of success in this society. But when you step back and you think about the real problems that are facing the world right now, we have famine, we have drought, we have climate change. I don't know that that's going to be solved by capitalism. I think it's going to need to be solved by something else. So that's, but you know, that's my personal view. So I think that you're right that the Tao Te Ching seems to clash with our values, but I also think that the Tao Te Ching can help us in a way cure ourselves from greed and selfishness and self-destructive behavior. Sorry if that sounded a little bit proselytizing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anupam, Professor, I request you to please advise how to find satisfaction in whatever we are doing, wherever we are. Should we listen to our heart or should we follow our mind in our daily life? So to think about what makes you happy, what pleases you. And I have personally found that when I am serving others, I am the most happy. When I'm focusing on myself, I am the least happy. But, you know, people are different. I think that when you're just focusing on yourself and your needs and your, there's a line in the Tao Te Ching, clench after money, possessions, and wealth, and you will never be satisfied. There will always be something else that you want. And so what is satisfaction? Satisfaction is acceptance, appreciation, gratitude, gratefulness. And so you can find whatever we are doing right now and be grateful. So for example, I would have loved for us to be able to work with plain vanilla, that plain vanilla technique. It's an amazing technique, but this group didn't want to engage for whatever reason. It's a new format. It's being recorded. There's a number of reasons why we didn't engage in it, and that's fine. Now, if I were completely attached to that, then I would be really unhappy with the outcome of the presentation. I would think that I'm a failure in some way, but I don't think that I'm a failure, and I don't think that I still think that plain vanilla technique is a valuable and useful technique. And I don't have any judgment either way about whether you're going to do that or not. But I think that maybe some of you might be curious and want to try this in your own classroom, how to use the plain vanilla technique. So I'm going to focus on what I got out of this presentation and not what didn't happen in the presentation. And it's not about focusing on the positive and the negative as Simon and I have talked about, but it's really taking the whole and accepting the whole and appreciating it for what it is. And so I suggest this idea of listening to our heart or following our minds. Maybe you can reunite them so that your mind follows your heart and that your heart is supports the mind. So find a way to make them connected in some way. Sanked asks, is the mind a CD player and we have to change the CD, or are we entertained by it? Well, that's an interesting question. It's not quite a CD player, because a CD is a set disc with songs on it that you can play over and over again. I suppose in some way our memories are that CD, but the thing that they've done with memory studies is that each time you have a memory, even if it's the same memory, you change it a little bit. And you change it a little bit because you are changed a little bit. In fact, everything that you do changes you in this slight way, even on the micro level. And so you can fool yourself into thinking that you are entertained by your memories, you're entertained by your thoughts. But we cannot constantly be entertained, right? So I think that the mind is processing things all the time. Okay, and then finally I'm going to answer Anjali, and then I see Karthik has raised your hand.
We are
yes,
running a little short on time.
Okay, so
Dr. Stone, yes, we have another, I think this could be the last question. Karthik, if it's okay, could you correspond with Dr. Stone?
Yeah, sure, Vidya, I'll write it up.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So which is the question we are taking?
Oh, I was just going to finish Anjali's question.
Yeah.
So it is interactive opposites, each complements and supplements the other. Okay, yes, so you agree with me. Okay, thank you. That wasn't a question, it was just a comment. Okay, I thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much, Dr. Tharakan, for hosting. Thank you all for being here and being present. Again, you see Vidya, she has added my contact information, so you can fill out that contact form, and I promise you I will contact you back and we can have that discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sophia. It was a wonderful session listening to you. Over to you, Vasudha.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful talk.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Stone, for that wonderful, engaging lecture.
Thank you so much.
I request Shefali to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vasudha.
Shefali.
On behalf of the Research Scholars of Philosophy, affiliated to the School of
Shefali, over to
Sanskrit,
you.
Philosophy and Indic Studies, Goa University, it is my pleasure to sorry, one second, please. Am I
Yes, you are
audible?
audible, Shefali.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, yes. One second, please. On behalf of the Research Scholars of Philosophy, affiliated to the School of Sanskrit, Philosophy and Indic Studies, Goa University. It is my pleasure to express our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Stone, who has illuminated our minds with her erudite lecture. Thank you, Dr. Stone, for sharing your experience and wisdom with us. I wish to uh, thank Professor Koshi Tharakan, the head of Department of Philosophy, and the faculty members of the Department of Philosophy for their constant support and encouragement in all our endeavors. We express appreciation to Mr. Datta, the Assistant Registrar, who made time to attend this lecture. A warm thanks to the faculty of other departments of Goa University, the faculty of affiliated colleges, students of the departments, and participants for being a receptive audience of the lecture. A special thanks to all those who helped with the promotion of the event. Lastly, kudos to all the research scholars who have worked tirelessly and behind the scenes to make this event a successful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafari. Thank you, Dr. Stone. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.